I'm Rochelle Gentile, president of the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra League. I'm here at the Dubuque Golf and Country Club, kicking off our virtual Soundbite series. Under normal circumstances, you'd be right here with me, enjoying a great lunch and a preview of the DSO's upcoming concert, and I'm sure you will be again soon. As you may know, the DSOL develops and administers projects, programs, and events that provide music education opportunities to folks of all ages, as well as financial support to the DSO and its youth ensemble programs. Each year, the League contributes support to youth education events and programs such as the 3rd and 5th grade Arts Trek concerts, the 4th grade Adopt a Musician program, the Youth Concerto competition, the Dubuque Symphony Youth Ensembles, and the Summer String Camp. Along with our many other endeavors is our Senior Classics program, now in its 9th year, providing performances by DSO musicians to entertain residents and their families at local nursing homes and assisted living centers. While the past year has looked a little different, we continue to focus our efforts on fundraising. We encourage and welcome you to join us in our 54th year of supporting the DSO. Please check out the DSO's website for more information about how you can get involved. We hope to see you soon, but before I go, I'd like to introduce our esteemed music director and conductor, Dr. William Intriligator.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome everyone. I'm so glad that we're back and able to perform for you in a safe, socially distanced way. It's been a year since our last Soundbites lecture, and I'm very excited to get back into our music and to reconnect with our audiences. We have a wonderful program for you for these Classics 1 programs in February 2021. And I'm going to talk about the pieces in separate videos in this new format. And let's just get right into it. I'll talk a little bit about the first piece on the program, Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 3. One of the things that became very apparent to me over the course of the 11 months of this pandemic was just how much musicians themselves have turned to Bach in these difficult times to provide solace and for many of us performing and playing Bach, whether it just be for ourselves at home or in public, it's almost like a meditative experience. And there's something just so fundamental and human about Bach's music. So I think it wasn't surprising that so many of our musicians from the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra performed Bach when they were performing on our DSO Live from Our Living Room series these past months. And for myself too, it's like I can't go a day without playing Bach at the piano. It's like my meditation, or even just as fundamental as breathing. There's just something so wonderful about his music. It's so universal. It's so timeless. And this Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 is one of his all-time greats. To remind you a little bit about how it goes, here's the opening of the first movement. Such incredible music. The origin of this piece is really fascinating because in Bach's time, he never referred to them as the Brandenburg Concertos. There are 6 Brandenburg Concertos, and they were grouped together by Bach when he sent them to Christian the Margrave of Brandenburg, Christian Ludwig, the Margrave of Brandenburg. So he sent these 6 incredible concertos in 1721 to the Margrave of Brandenburg. So this was a province in Prussia, just west of Berlin, where the Brandenburg Gate is in Berlin, if you've ever seen that. And so people are unsure why he sent them to him. And each of the 6 concertos has different groups of solo instruments, and it shows an incredible array of creativity, variety, use of, just expert use and knowledge of the instruments. And so it's believed that perhaps he sent these to Christian Ludwig as a sort of job application, that maybe he was seeking a position there. His time in Curtin, where he was in residence and prior to that, that maybe he wasn't happy with the way things were going there. And so he was looking for a new job. There's no evidence that the Margrave of Brandenburg even replied to Bach. And certainly there's no evidence that these pieces were ever performed in his court. And so it's a real shame, actually. And these pieces were sort of lost to history and really first performed maybe 150 years later. Thank goodness the sheet music has survived. But it's so interesting that these pieces, all 6 of the Brandenburgs, were so different in their instrumentation and style, but yet they all have a very festive quality about them. And so I think starting our concert with the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 is a very festive way to come back to performing together. The first movement utilizes 3 separate groups of 3 solo instruments. So there are 3 solo violins, 3 solo violas, 3 solo cellos, and then there's an accompaniment bass and harpsichord part. And using those combinations of 9 solo instruments in different ways, he's constantly having musical variety in this piece. So sometimes you'll have a group of 3 violins play a solo, and then sometimes you'll have the whole group play together. And then sometimes you'll have a group of 3 violas play a solo. And then sometimes you might have a group of one violin play a solo. And maybe it's 3 cellos, or maybe it's 1 cello. The combinations are constantly changing, and he explores every possible permutation. The soloists also have to play backup. It's not exactly like the older forms of the concerto grossos of Vivaldi or maybe some of the Corelli or Handel concerto grossos, where there are large groups of soloists, but they oftentimes will not accompany the other. So this is kind of a new form in some ways, and Bach was experimenting. It's fascinating to sort of close your eyes during this music and just let it wash over you and listen for the different combinations of these voices of the solo parts. And as I said, there are times where the whole group plays again together. There's some unusual harmonic daring in this piece where he shifts harmonies in unexpected ways that were really quite avant-garde for his time, writing this in 1721. Another interesting thing about this particular concerto is that he reused this first movement in a cantata that he wrote later in June of 1729. His cantata number 174, that he actually, because he had sent the original music, the fancy score to the Margrave of Brandenburg, he kind of had to go by memory and by drafts that he had. And so he had some students kind of recreate it from some of his sketches, and then he added oboes and French horns. And this is a sinfonia in the midst of an otherwise vocal cantata that he wrote years later. So that's an interesting thing. So in other words, he liked the music so much and wanted to hear a performance of it, because he never got to hear any of the Brandenburgs performed, really, that he put it in a cantata that he knew that he could perform in Leipzig, where he was at that time. And it was probably because he had musicians from the Collegium Musicum in Leipzig that it was a sort of a new position that he took on, and he had these wonderful professional musicians. So we wanted to give them something sort of secular to play, this symphonia in the midst of an otherwise sacred cantata. The second movement of this 3-movement concerto is amazingly brief. In fact, it's really just a shorthand. It's 2 chords. And so basically the idea was that it was an opportunity for maybe one of the violinists or maybe a harpsichord player to improvise a sort of cadenza at that moment. And for our concerts with the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra, our wonderful concertmaster, Eleanor Barch, will be improvising, or not improvising, but she will create a cadenza for us as that middle movement. And again, even in that middle movement, which only has 2 chords, the chord progression is harmonically daring and unexpected, surprising. And then the third movement continues with even more energy, if you will, than the first movement had. It's almost like one of Bach's great jigs. He's written some fantastic jigs, like in the French suites and some of his other keyboard music. But this is a jig that has these wonderful combinations of strings at his disposal. And you'll have ascending arpeggios in one voice and descending scales in another, acting in contrary motion, giving the music incredible vitality and forward momentum. So this very energetic and upbeat and positive music is a great way to start the program and to mark our return. After the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3, we're going to perform a very different style of Bach. It's just one of my favorites because it's so beautiful I couldn't resist putting the air from his Orchestral Suite No. 3, the so-called air on the G string. Bach did not call it the air on the G string, like the Brandenburgs were not known that way to him as well. There was a violinist later who developed it as a sort of solo piece for violin, maybe violin and piano, where it was performed only on the lowest string of the violin, the G string. It's simply called air in his orchestral suite, and it's just one movement of a whole suite of dances. And this is not really a dance, is it? It's such a beautiful piece. It's such an incredible example of lyricism for the Baroque era, which otherwise was, very much concerned with this idea of like moto perpetuo, fast-moving motion, sometimes painting pictures musically. But this is just a sense of calm and peacefulness that is unmatched, really, I think, in the entire Baroque era. I mean, yes, there are some beautiful slow movements in other pieces of Bach. My goodness, fantastic slow movements. Beautiful slow movements by Handel and Vivaldi and other Baroque composers. Yet still, I think the air has a special place among them. Here's an example of the little bit of the opening of the air by Bach. Let's see. I've got a couple recordings here. I'll try this one. Fantastic, timeless music. And there's something kind of calming about that piece that I thought would be very good during these, difficult times. As a country and around the world with the pandemic, we've experienced a lot of change and upheaval, and there's something very reassuring about this music. I think the experience of hearing it live with the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra will be very healing for all of us. That's my wish, at least. Thank you for tuning in to these Soundbites videos. I'm going to sign off now and continue with a separate video for some of the other pieces on the program. Thank you.